So why is posture and re-education in movement important? Correction of posture is the first step in any successful rehabilitation program, regardless of the injury, and requires sound stability muscles. The importance of posture in preventing lower back pain and neck pain is obvious, but it is equally important with both lower limb and upper limb problems as well. To excel in any physical activity and reap maximum benefits, you need to have a solid foundation built on perfect form. People definitely take posture for granted, pretty much like breathing. They rarely consider it when exercising. Bad posture and incorrect technique can cause imbalances in the muscles, which leads to injury. You can tell so much from a person when you look at their posture, as it can affect a person's presence, stature, and more importantly, their confidence. To be 100% efficient, human movement requires the joints to be positioned correctly with one another. When misalignment occurs, stabilizing muscles become dysfunctional and compensation can occur. It may take an injury for these compensatory factors to be highlighted, or can be the cause of secondary injuries. Very rarely do muscles fail unless they lose neural innervation. When stabilizing muscles become inhibited, they fail to activate when appropriate, irrespective of whether they are strong or whether the individual has good brain to muscle control over them. Re-education of movement. There tends to be so much focus on how we move that we sometimes forget to consider how we move. Our bodies are designed to handle the stresses of movement and also weight bearing when those movements are performed a certain way. When our bodies move in such a way that differs from the norm, we are asking our joints and our tissues to work in positions where they are vulnerable to overuse and strain. We all have a blueprint that allows for some deviation. Pushing the limits of this deviation is where it all goes wrong. Any given movement involves contribution from a number of different joints and regions. For example, when bending to touch your toes or picking something up from the floor, there should be equal movement in the hip joints and the spine. Sometimes, however, these proportions are altered. Often the hip joint part of the movement becomes restricted, which is often due to having tight hamstring muscles or a stiff joint capsule, and the body compensates for this by restriction by moving excessively in the lower back itself. Over time, repetition of this faulty movement pattern leads to the development of excessive movement in the lower back in that direction, which is referred to as hypermobility, and this is common in those with lower back pain. Retraining of movement pattern is achieved with exercises to re-educate these normal limb and whole body movement patterns, and initially involves significant concentration to get it right. With repetition, the movement pattern becomes more subconscious and eventually becomes natural, almost like default behavior. It is vitally important that training reaches this stage, because if not, the poor movement habits tend to re-establish themselves with recurrence of pain and injury.